Nature's Revenge, the absurd tale of Australia's war against birds. Humanity. We've conquered mountains, tamed seas, split atoms, and even left footprints on the moon. Yet sometimes, dear viewers, we find ourselves utterly defeated by the most unexpected adversaries. Today, we venture to the sun-scorched landscapes of Western Australia, where in 1932, the proud Australian military embarked on what might be history's most embarrassing military campaign. Ladies, gentlemen, and those of superior taste who subscribe to my channel, I present to you the Great Emu War. A tale where man, armed with machine guns and military strategy, went to battle against birds and lost spectacularly. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Prepare yourselves for a journey into absurdity that would make even Kafka raise an eyebrow. After all, only your beloved, eccentric senpai could do justice to such magnificent nonsense. Now, before you dismiss this as mere folly, though let's be honest, it absolutely is, we must first understand the curious circumstances that led to this avian altercation. The year was 1932. The Great Depression had wrapped its miserable fingers around the global economy. Australia, like much of the world, was suffering. The government, in its infinite wisdom, had a brilliant plan to boost agricultural production in Western Australia's Campion district, give farmland to veterans returning from World War I. Here you go, brave soldiers. You survived the trenches of Europe. Surely you can tame this unforgiving desert landscape with no agricultural experience whatsoever. These veterans, hardened by war, but perhaps softened in the head by accepting this opportunity, set about creating wheat farms in what can generously be described as challenging conditions. Little irrigation, marginal soil, and a climate that alternates between desperately dry and biblical flood. But they persevered. Fields were ploughed, seeds were planted, and hopes, against all evidence to the contrary, were high. There was just one tiny 6-foot-tall problem they hadn't anticipated. The emus were coming. Allow me to introduce you to the emu, Australia's contribution to nature's gallery of animals that seem like they were designed by a committee of drunk gods. Standing up to 6 feet tall and weighing around 130 pounds, these flightless birds are essentially feathered velociraptors with an attitude problem. They can sprint at 30 miles per hour, kick with enough force to disembowel a kangaroo, and possess beady, soulless eyes that suggest they're contemplating your demise, even while eating seeds placidly from your hand. But here's what makes them truly formidable. Emus are chaotic geniuses. They don't follow predictable patterns. They don't march in formation. They scatter like quantum particles when threatened, making them nearly impossible to target. And they're tough. Oh, are they tough? Their dense feathers act like primitive body armor, and their internal organs are protected by thick muscle. In essence, nature created the perfect guerrilla fighter, then gave it a ridiculous hairdo. And in 1932, approximately 20,000 of these prehistoric-looking monstrosities decided that the newly planted wheat fields of Western Australia looked like an all-you-can-eat buffet with excellent ambience. As the emus descended upon the farmlands, the situation quickly spiraled from minor nuisance to biblical plague. The birds devoured crops, destroyed fences with their powerful legs, and left gaping holes that allowed rabbits, because Australia needed yet another invasive pest, to enter and cause further destruction. The farmers, many of them veterans who had traded German artillery for avian artillery of a different sort, were desperate. Their livelihood was disappearing down the gullets of these feathered fiends, faster than government promises on election day. We fought at Gallipoli, survived the Somme, and now we're being defeated by oversized chickens? Not on my bloody watch. And so, in November 1932, these farmers did what any reasonable group of citizens would do. They lobbied their government to declare war on birds. I want you to imagine that meeting, dear viewers. Picture the Minister of Defense sitting at his desk, perhaps enjoying a cup of tea, when a delegation bursts in demanding military intervention against birds. In any sane world, this would be the end of our story, but this is Australia we're talking about. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, given politicians' eternal quest to secure rural votes, the government agreed to help. The Minister of Defence authorised a military operation against the emus, because apparently the Australian Defence Force had nothing better to do than shoot birds. The mission was entrusted to Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery, who was given 2 Lewis machine guns, 10,000 rounds of ammunition, and 2 soldiers to assist him. I can only imagine the conversation when he received these orders. Major Meredith, your next assignment is of vital importance to national security. Defending against potential Japanese expansion, securing maritime borders? No, we need you to shoot some very large birds. I beg your pardon, sir. Whatever his private thoughts, Meredith dutifully headed to Campion in early November 1932, armed with military hardware that had proven effective against German troops, but would soon meet its match in flightless Australian avifauna. November 2nd, 1932, a date that will live in ornithological infamy. The first engagement of the Great Emu War was about to begin. Major Meredith had set up an ambush near a dam where about 50 emus had been sighted. The plan was simple. Wait for the birds to gather, then open fire with the Lewis guns, which could discharge an impressive 500 rounds per minute. On paper, it was a massacre waiting to happen. The emus approached cautiously. Meredith gave the order. The guns roared to life, with a sound that had struck fear into the hearts of men on European battlefields. And the emus scattered. Not in panic, mind you, but with the coordinated precision of a special forces unit. They split into small groups, ran in zigzag patterns, and maintained distances that made accurate targeting nearly impossible. When the dust settled, only about a dozen birds lay dead, while the rest vanished into the bush, presumably to share intelligence about human weapons capabilities. Meredith was stunned. His first encounter with emu tactics had not gone as planned. But the Major was nothing if not persistent. In the days that followed, Meredith and his men adjusted their strategy. They attempted to herd the emus into ambushes. They tried mounting a machine gun on a truck to create a mobile firing platform, a primitive tank, if you will, in this most primitive of wars. But at every turn, the emus countered with what can only be described as avian genius. When pursued by the truck, they split up and ran in different directions, knowing the vehicle couldn't follow them all. The bumpy terrain made accurate shooting from a moving vehicle nearly impossible, and most frustratingly, the birds seemed to develop an uncanny sense for the maximum range of the Lewis guns, keeping just beyond effective firing distance. One particularly memorable attempt involved setting up an ambush near a water source, betting that thirst would eventually overcome caution. Over 1,000 emus approached. The soldiers waited until the birds were in optimal range. They opened fire and the gun jammed after killing only a dozen birds. The rest scattered, undoubtedly making mental notes about the unreliability of human technology. By November 8th, just 6 days into the campaign, Meredith reported using 2,500 rounds of ammunition to kill approximately 200 emus. That's about 12.5 bullets per bird, a ratio that would make even the most trigger-happy action movie hero blush with embarrassment. As news of the military's struggle against the feathered menace spread, the Australian media, and indeed the world press, had an absolute field day. Newspapers ran headlines like "Emu War a failure" and "Machine guns fail to win the war of extermination." In Parliament, one exceptionally witty conservationist asked whether medals were to be awarded to the birds for their victories. The opposition seized the opportunity to mock the government's handling of the situation, because nothing brings politicians together like the chance to ridicule their opponents. The British media was particularly delighted. One can almost hear the posh BBC announcer of the time. And in Australia, our colonial cousins continue their curious conflict with the local bird life. Sources report that the emus have not yet signed any peace treaty, nor have they shown interest in surrendered terms offered by human negotiators. The operation was quickly becoming an international embarrassment. By November 10th, Major Meredith was forced to withdraw. In his official report, which I imagine was written with the enthusiasm of a man documenting his own root canal, he noted that his men had expended 9,860 rounds and claimed 986 kills, plus approximately 2,500 birds that later died of their wounds. Even accepting these somewhat optimistic figures, that's only about one emu killed for every 4 bullets fired. And considering that the original emu force numbered around 20,000, the campaign had eliminated roughly 15% of the enemy combatants. Hardly a decisive victory.